Thanks for being here tonight, everybody. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes before we get started. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. My name's Zach. We'll do some additional introductions in a little bit. Just wanted to start with some of the Zoom instructions to give you the best viewing experience throughout the rest of the panel tonight. If you go up to the top under the view and click hide non-video participants, it'll only show the people who are currently speaking in terms of the moderators as well as our panelists who have their videos on. So I believe that would be the best. And then otherwise, we'll get started about 30 seconds here. All right, welcome everybody to our 2025 edition of the National Match Panel for Vascular Surgery, where it's co-hosted tonight by the Yale VSIG, as well as some of the members of the VESS VSIG, the Vascular and Endovascular Surgical Society. So we really appreciate you taking the time out of your night to be here, and we hope we give you a great experience to help you along your way towards vascular surgery. These are the facilitators for the event tonight. My name is Zach Williams. I'm currently a third-year medical student at the Upstate Medical University in Syracuse, and I'll let the other facilitators introduce themselves as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrew. I'm in my research year at Yale. I'm going to be applying to vascular surgery in the fall.
Hi everyone, I'm Judy. Like Andrew, I'm also rising M4 on my research year at Yale.
Hi everyone, I'm Cayetana. I'm a rising fourth year as well from Ponce Science University and finishing my research year at Yale as well.
All right. And these are some of the members of the Best VSIG specialized team who helped with this meeting together tonight. The Best VSIG was originally founded as an individual student group from students and institutions all across the country who do not either have a home institution or a lot of vascular mentorship at their home institution. And our goal of the program is just to increase vascular mentorship and exposure across the country and sort of bring additional sight onto the field. The agenda for tonight is just going to include some of the brief introductions you've seen already. We'll go through some 2025 match stats in just a minute, and then we'll have the panel discussion and move through a couple of topics with preformed questions for our panelists to hear about their experiences a little bit and what they have to share with us regarding matching into vascular surgery. After which we'll open the floor to some questions from the group in case anybody has additional questions which were not answered previously through the panel.
We want to congratulate our newest vascular surgeons in town, the graduating M4s from the VESS VSIG. Congratulates again, and we can't be to be you next year. Next slide, please. Awesome. So before we start, we want to let the panelists introduce themselves. Valerie, would you like to start? Awesome.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Val. I grew up in the Boston area and went to undergrad in Pittsburgh, but I've been a student at Rutgers RWJ for the past 4 years and actually just matched and decided to stick around at Rutgers. So I will be here at RWJ for the next 5.
Awesome. Colin?
Hey everyone, my name is Colin, born and raised in Connecticut. Went to UConn for everything up until this point. Excited to not be at UConn anymore. I'm matched at Mayo. I'm actually in Minnesota right now, looking at houses. So excited to be here.
Good luck finding something.
We actually just got our offer accepted today, so
Oh,
our search
congrats.
is done.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. Awesome. Corey?
Hi, yeah. So my name's Corey. I'm actually from San Diego. I live in Sacramento, though. I went to medical school in Idaho, and I just got into residency at UC Davis. So I get to go back home.
That's great. Bakir?
Yeah, my name is Bakar. I'm originally from Toronto. I'm a Canadian. Then I went to the University of Rochester for medical school, and now I'm going to BI Deaconess in Boston.
Awesome. Needy?
Hi, I'm Nidhi. I go to school at California North State, and I took a research year in between my third and fourth. Then I matched at Northwestern, so happy to be there for another 7 years.
Awesome. Felix?
Hi everyone, my name is Felix Apia. I was born and raised in Ghana, West Africa. I immigrated to New York about 15 years ago. I went to Upstate Medical University and I'm staying Central/Western New York at University of Rochester.
Great. And last but not least, Armin?
Hi everyone, my name is Armin Tabi. I grew up in Gothenburg in Sweden and did medical school in Stockholm, Sweden, and then research here at Mayo in Rochester, and I'm heading to UCLA.
All over the place. That's incredible. Thank you. I'll leave you with Andrew.
Thank you, Cayetana and Zach. So just before we dive into the vascular match stats, I'll briefly describe the training route to become a vascular surgeon. So the traditional route was to complete a general surgery residency followed by 2 years of vascular surgery fellowship. And with this, you're board certified in both general surgery and vascular surgery, and this is known as the 5+2 route. But around 15 years ago, the Integrated Vascular Surgery Residency Program was established in large part due to the expansion of endovascular practice and the fact that in general surgery residency, those interested in vascular spent significant time learning procedures and techniques they would not use in their future practice. Thus, the integrated program was developed, where residents complete 2 to 3 years of core gen surge rotations, followed by 2 to 3 years of vascular surgery alone. And this is known as the 0+5 route. And so I'll just briefly review the integrated vascular surgery match stats from this year. And this is just meant to be a general overview. There's more granular data found at the NRMP website. So overall, there was 102 total positions among 77 programs, which was up 2 positions from last year's match. And as you can see, the number of positions offered is increasing yearly. So there was a total of 102 total applicants with 102 matches for a match rate of 59%. Among the 109 US MD senior applicants who applied, there were 84 who matched for a match rate of 77%. And among the 9 DO applicants, there were 2 matches. Among the 31 non-US IMG applicants, there were 9 matches for a match rate of 29%. And of the 7 US IMG applicants, there were 2 matches for a match rate of 29%. And so now we'll switch gears and turn to the Q&A, starting with the discussion on how our panelists found vascular surgery and why they decided to pursue it. So first, we'll start with Val. So I'll do a 2-part question. So how did you find vascular surgery and what drew you to a career in vascular surgery?
Yeah, so great question. And for everyone listening, this is an important thing to think about for yourself and have an answer prepared for interview season, because this is one that you will get in every single interview. Um, I found vascular sort of by chance in my third year. I was randomly assigned to be on the vascular service here at Robert Wood during my Gen Surge rotation. So sort of just by chance, like was luckily assigned to be with them. And that's sort of what introduced me to it. I actually didn't know it was an option before that. And sort of spent a couple weeks with them and afterwards, like left the rotation just feeling like, oh my God, like what's going on in the OR right now? Like, can I go back? And that sort of was it for me. Um, but I think what really drew me to a career in vascular specifically was it just sort of checks all of those boxes of things that I was looking for. So I had considered other stuff previously, and I think we'll talk about that in a second. But for me, it really is, a nice balance of you get some emergent cases, some vascular trauma, but you also have like scheduled surgeries and a little bit of predictability. You get to have follow up with some of your patients in clinic, so you get to actually like have ownership over their care. Um, and then also you get to do a nice mix of like open procedures and cool endovascular things. So you can do the crazy open surgeries, fixing a ruptured AAA, but you also get to have a little bit of like delicacy and new devices and technology going on.
Awesome. Thank you. Nidhi, would you like to answer the same question? So how did you find vascular and what drew you to the career?
Yeah, I honestly did not really consider vascular at all up until my third year. I got lucky that I had like a week of it on my gen surge rotation that I wasn't even supposed to have. So truly just serendipity, I guess, for me. But I'm so glad I did. And I think by that point I had recognized that I knew what I wanted out of a specialty, and I was honestly like in this phase where I was like, I don't feel like anything that I'm seeing is really meeting what I want, and maybe this is just an imperfect dream. But I really loved, I think, the fact that I could work with patients kind of longitudinally and really build a relationship with them, but also have a lot of hands-on experience, work kind of both from a medical point of view, but then a surgical point of view, and be able to manage both those aspects of patient care for an extended period of time. And I really, really just loved like the breadth of anatomy that you get to work with. And so I just was so happy that there was something that like beautifully meshed all of those things together. And there's just an insane amount of innovation and discovery in vascular as well. So I think it's just perfect. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And Felix, what about you?
Yeah, relative to what Nidhi and Valerie kind of said earlier. Boo boo, I'm in a meeting, okay? I'll talk to you later. Go call mommy. Yeah, I'm also a father, as you can tell. She loves when I'm. Yes, I know. I'm in a meeting. I'm so sorry, guys. Um, so yeah, I kind of discovered vascular in third year. I had a friend, Brandon, who was interested in vascular from the very first day. And I remember I came to medicine thing and I was going to cardiology or at least do something in IM. Anytime I talk about my interest in medicine, he kept telling me to try vascular surgery. And I kept putting it off. Time and time again, I kept putting it off until I did my surgery rotation and fell in love with surgery. I did ortho as a subspecialty because I kind of saw that instant gratification portion of ortho, and I thought, with vascular, you deal with lifelong conditions that never gets done, and I always wanted that the tangible surgical interventions that ortho presented. So after that, I wasn't satisfied with ortho. To be honest, I thought that the ego in the OR was a little too much for my personality and didn't really vibe with it. So I did a vascular AI in my third year. And oh boy, that was everything I ever wanted. It's and that kind of goes into what drew me to it. Specifically was the breadth of interventions. Vascular surgery tackles everything from the neck all the way down to the feet. Even in my AI, there were some OB cases that vascular surgery dealt with, including pediatric cases. So I was like, boy, like we do everything. And then and the vascular cases was also, the rapid growing, intellectually stimulating aspect of endovascular and the marrying of technology, engineering with surgery was some of the things that really drew me to vascular surgery.
Yeah, thank you. And it sounds like you found vascular surgery relatively late on because you were considering other things. Could you touch on how that impacted your application in the match for you?
Thank you very much. So yes, I did find vascular halfway through third year. And thank God I had Zach and Brandon. Even though Zach was a second year med student at the time, I felt like he knew more than I did. So I reached out to them. I was like, guys, I just found vascular surgery. What do I do? And they were like, oh, sign up for this conferences, try to get some hands-on research. And I'm very grateful to them because they kind of put me in touch with mentors who had ongoing research that I could get involved with. These mentors also connected me with other mentors. I think one of our applicants is going to UC Davis, Dr. Rowe, who was very instrumental in my throughout my application, helped me with the book up chapter and other things that really made me competitive for the research, the application.
Thank you for that insight. Now I'll open up to any of the other panelists if they want to touch on why vascular and anything else they wanted to talk about regarding how they chose vascular and what else they were considering.
Yeah,
I'll just
I
add.
find,
Oh, go
I
for it.
mean, for me and a lot of my co-applicants, like from my school, and friends, there's intersection amongst a lot of different specialties. We're all interested in vascular, but we're also interested in a couple other things. So, I was interested in trauma surgery. I was interested in cardiac surgery. So things that generally were, gave you the chance to save lives, think quickly. But then I felt like vascular sort of applied, you had those emergent cases, but then you had the complex sort of elective cases. So you got a mix of that. You weren't being pigeonholed into one box. And then it came down to mentorship, I think. There were just great mentors, great educators in the field of vascular surgery. I think that's broadly just a cultural thing in our field. Physicians are very motivated to get uh, younger vascular surgeons sort of into the workforce, and it's just sort of part of the culture. So a lot of my attendings, once I expressed interest, sort of brought me along, and got me interested sort of deeper into it after I expressed interest initially.
Thank you, Bakar. Yeah, I agree. Vascular surgeons are very supportive of students, and it's really great to be mentored. Okay, now I'll hand it over to Cayetano to talk more about the application process.
Thank you, Andrew. So now we're gonna move into next slide, please. Thank you. The application process, I know, including myself, we have a lot of questions regarding the process. So I'm gonna start with Corey. So what were factors you looked for in programs you applied to? And I think we can put these, well, no, let's answer that first because the personal statement, I think it deserves its own spot.
Um, so I'll answer that kind of in two parts. One is that it largely relied on like my experience there. I definitely heavily weighed and ranked programs I went and did an audition rotation at more than those that I did not, even if like word of mouth, it was a great program. The interview seemed great. Like I just fully went off vibes when I was there and how I felt and how the residents carried themselves and how the preceptors taught. And that was largely my main thing. But then kind of aside from that, it was really just getting a sense of the culture while you are interviewing, which is hard to do, but with pre-meet and greets, or how many photos are they showing of their residents? How many of them are actually all together when they're showing photos of the residents is one thing, but the other was like I wanted to be at a level one trauma center. I wanted, obviously to be as close as home as possible, and I wanted an area where it was heavily academic, and I'd have those mentors that really prioritize teaching. I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but I loved clinic because I feel like it's a really great opportunity to learn. It's kind of like you have to eat your broccoli first. And so that was heavily like one thing that I weighed in as well.
Awesome. So knowing what you want is important. Armin, do you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when I was at, I mean, I think it's very similar to what Corey said, but I think when I applied, I applied for every program that there was. I think as an as an IMG, I was unsure how many interviews I would get, so I just applied everywhere because I thought that, when I get when I get the interview invite, then I can decide if I want to take it or not, depending on how many I get. But when I didn't know, I just applied for everything, and I saw it kind of as practice. Even though even if I wasn't very interested in that program, I would still go if I had the time just to practice interviewing because that's something I haven't done a lot before. So yeah, kind of just applied for every program that there was.
Gotcha. Colin, do you want to chime in and kind of let us know which factors that you looked for in programs?
Yeah, I had a very different take than Corey and Armin. I heavily weighed my decision on both my mentors' opinions, my own opinions based on my experiences from away rotations, as well as just looking at the program websites. I have a family too, so there was a lot of other external factors for me applying everywhere. But I really only applied to 40 programs out of the 77 or 78 that there were in the cycle. And that was mainly from excuse me, the shared Excel sheet, their own websites, and then just kind of word of mouth stuff. And I mentor a lot of students that are asking me questions about where to apply to do that legwork up front. A lot of the people that I was talking to during my cycle were sort of met, like Armin said, met with two programs that were interviewing on the same date that only worked with their schedule, and they had to make that decision right then in the 5 minutes of trying to book them. And I didn't have really any of those conflicts because I put the thought into applying to programs I actually wanted to interview at upfront, and I had the luxury of doing that with my application. So I think that was a really good way of going through it. Worked well with me. Um, so that's another take. I would also say that I did two away rotations. I don't know if we'll talk about this later, but I did two away rotations. One of them I ranked number one, and one of them I didn't. And that was a really good experience. And why I didn't rank them very highly, and sort of what I was looking for in other programs when I was interviewing, and clues that maybe it wouldn't be a good fit for me. But we could talk about more about that later if that comes up.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about it later on. But thank you very much. It's nice to have two perspective. It's good to know that. While we're talking about these, did any of you dual apply general surgery and vascular surgery integrated? Yeah. If so, Corey, I see you nodding yes. So, why would you do like why did you dual apply? And if so, for example, like if you received both general surgery and vascular surgery interviews, did you took both of them or yes or no and why?
So I know, again, this is also a topic we'll touch on later, but I'm a DO applicant, and so there's no secret that I have different hurdles to face when matching into vascular surgery than my MD counterparts. And so I need to just have realistic expectations and know that even if vascular surgery is what I want to do, general surgeries are out to get there if that's the way that I have to go, and to do such. But I was very selective with the general surgery. I only applied to the however many signals they gave me for that route. And then when it came to like interview invites, I'd always, if I was vascular or general, I would drop the general interview. And then I tried to make as many as my general interviews earlier in the season. So that was like my kind of practicing, and then could save my vascular towards later in the season.
Nice. That's a good strategy. Awesome. Anyone else?
I dual applied as well. And like Amin, I applied to every vascular surgery program. I did heed it to the advice of my mentors, just like Colin, but I was a little neurotic. Actually, one of my mentors told me to apply everything. I initially applied to 59, and he was like, "What are you doing? Just apply everything." I was like, "Okay." So I did. General surgery, I was very methodical about what I was applying to. I wanted to be on the Northeast, if not for vascular. Vascular surgery, I know the Midwest and the South have much complex cases, and you learn a lot more. So I was open to move in from the Northeast. So general surgery, I was very methodical about it. Only applied 30 programs on the Northeast, and I got almost 60% interview back. And of those 60%, I think were 30, and I had almost like 20 interviews, and I took 15 of those. And I only did that specifically based on program names and location to like proximity to New York City, major cities. Like you saw, I have family, so I really considered what went into it. Again, I knew that I loved general surgery, and I did not use general surgery as a backup, contrary to what other people does. I felt like I would be happy doing general surgery and vascular surgery equally. It was a matter of 7 years versus 5 years, and nonetheless, the experience I would have gotten otherwise from general surgery would be very, very instrumental in my practice in future. That maybe some integrated vascular surgery, especially those on the northeast, may not be exposed to. So and to be frank, I ranked some general surgery programs above vascular surgery programs. Um, so yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, this is great. It's important then to really know if you're applying, if you can really do general surgery for the whole 5 to 7 years, because there's both programs available. Awesome. I think one of the biggest questions, Needy, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, you can go ahead. I don't want to drag it on. I just
Go
wanted to
ahead.
provide a little bit of additional context, kind of on the flip side. I considered dual applying, but I didn't. So if anyone wanted to like be in the situation, sorry if you can hear my German Shepherd barking so loudly. Um, and ultimately, kind of why I chose not to was one, I didn't want to put in the extra legwork, and I wanted to really just dedicate and put all my time into my vascular application. I think that really worked out well for me. So I think, it's a decision you have to make, and it can really go either way. I didn't really have any mentors for my home program, and I was really concerned just because no one had matched vascular for my school before, and the folks that did ended up matching general surgery. So it was kind of a big decision to choose not to apply general surgery, just because, especially from the advice I was getting. But kind of to Felix's point, where I didn't want to match in a general surgery program, and I figured that if I didn't match vascular, I would rather almost see myself at a prelim gen surg spot and reapply the following year. And it's kind of a weird, chaotic advice to give someone because I think that's not what you would traditionally hear, but that's what I felt was best for me and resonated with me if I, like, thankfully did not find myself in that position. So I think you just kind of have to consider what your options are and what you're kind of looking at. But if anyone wanted to know more about why I didn't end up doing it, even though everyone in the world told me, just because of where I go to school and kind of our track record at my school necessarily, at least with surgical subspecialty, I'm happy to chat more offline.
No, thank you very much for saying that. I think it's very important to also have that perspective because most of us are like find ourselves wondering if we should dual apply or not. So thank you very much
I
for that.
also want to add one more quick thing,
Or
if I can. I'm on the perspective that Nidhi said, I only apply vascular surgery. The thing that I think that all applicants, especially, there are more and more applicants that are getting interested earlier in medical school. My application, if I took like a 5 foot approach to my application, just screamed vascular surgery. And so any general surgery program I applied to I thought would clearly think, oh, he's applying general surgery as a backup because his whole all 10 experiences and all his publications are on vascular surgery. So I just thought it would have been a waste of everyone's time. And I actually was even more extreme than Needy. I if I didn't match vascular, I probably wouldn't have done a prelim general surgery, and I probably would have done a different specialty altogether. Just think like I've shot my best shot at vascular. If none of the places I interviewed at wanted me, then that's it. That's fine. It is what it is. So that's another perspective too.
I love that. I love that 100%. So I think one of the other questions that a lot of people have is how to go about your personal statement. So if you can, tell us about your like how do you start it, like, when you're conflicted and how to just start writing your experience. Back here you can start, if that's okay.
Yeah, so I think I mean the sooner you start the better, as a general rule. I will admit that I didn't start as soon as I could have. But in some ways maybe that was better because I didn't overthink it that as a consequence. I think with personal statements be perfect is the enemy of good. And most what my mentors told me was that most personal statements are going to be in this sort of you know, bottom 10 to top, 90th percentile. And that's a fine place to be in. If the rest of your application is strong and sort of demonstrating interest in vascular surgery, you don't need your personal statement to be perfect and knock it out the park. And that's not going to be what matches you at your top choice. For me, I tried to sort of have a plan, convey that I was, how my interest in vascular surgery has evolved. But I didn't try to like sort of stand out too much. I just tried to have a solid personal statement. And I think that ended up working out for me. And then the benefit of starting early, if you can, is that you can send it to people, send it to your mentors if you have some, or other students or residents that you may know, and they can take a look at it for a sanity check. But I wouldn't complicate it. I would just sort of try and keep it as simple as possible personally.
Awesome. That helps. Valerie, do you want to add something?
Yeah, actually, I did want to say, like, I agree with Bakir. Like, it's important to keep in mind that, 90% of them will probably be like good enough to sort of average personal statements. I really, stressed over the personal statement and was trying to think about what are the perfect words that I can write down. But I think it's just important to remember that these are being read by attending surgeons. And if any of you have worked with them in a hospital, you know how short their attention spans can be. And so remembering that like helped me take off the pressure a little bit. And all you can really do is sort of speak from the heart and talk about, why you love vascular and why you would be a great applicant. And I think that helps sort of take some of the pressure off.
Awesome. Music to my ears. We had a lot of questions to go through. So for the sake of time, we're going to move to the next topic. So I'll leave you guys with Judy.
Thanks, Cayetana. So our next section is on away rotations. If you would mind going back one slide. Thanks. Okay. Which I guess some of us have already started to talk about. So we'd love to hear more about your experiences with aways and have a few questions to guide our discussion. First, did you do them? And if so, what factors played a role in deciding where to do them? And I'll ask Colin to kick us off. It sounds like these were informative to you. Now, taking a step back before you went on your aways, what factors sort of helped you decide where to apply and where to do them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say the sort of superfluous factor would be if it fit in my schedule. You can always adjust schedules, but a lot of times in VSLO, the block scheduling that they have could be like 3 weeks different to yours. And so you may have to budget for that, which was sort of a not really a reason, but it's an important factor. In any case, in terms of where I wanted to do my rotations, I wanted to do something local in the Northeast. That was a good program. And then somewhere farther away, since I was applying sort of all over, I wanted to get that experience of somewhere else. And it really came down to mentorship and where they thought that I would do well. A lot of my mentors I've known for 4 years in medical school, so they kind of knew me and they operated with me and they thought that I would do well in certain programs. So I just kind of chose from what they thought. And overall, I did 2 away rotations. It's just like overall, I think both of those experiences were very different, but very informative. Like I mentioned before, going into the application cycle, knowing sort of 2 different styles of hospital systems, styles of operating, just how they run their service was really crucial for me to get very quickly how to deduce if a program is more of a fit for me or not. So I thought that those experiences were invaluable. Thinking of how I was after my second away rotation in the end of October, just based on my schedule, I don't think that I could really do a third one to my best 100%. I don't know if that's going to come up if how many away rotations we should do. But I thought that doing I did like a prolonged sub-I at my home institution, and then 2 away rotations kind of worked out for me. But I would love to hear if other people did more. I know a lot of people did more than 2.
I did too.
Me too.
I did that times a lot, like an exhausting amount. I can't agree more with Colin when it came to like, I don't want to say I overestimated my ability to do so because I like to think of myself as like a strong-willed individual, but there's something about just living out of your suitcase for 8 months, traveling in a different state, being away from your family and your home, and living in some questionable Airbnbs that will eventually get to you. So I probably did about 9 in vascular. And then I did about 10 weeks worth of trauma surgery.
I
And how did, yeah, go
I
on,
did
Felix.
too as well. And that was because I was dual applying, like I said. So I did a cardiothoracic sub-I at my home institution, in addition to the vascular surgery AI. So I did two home AIs, one in general surgery, which was a thoracic surgery one, and then one in vascular surgery in order to get those two letters. So if you're thinking about doing dual applying, you need a general surgery letter, and you should do that as well. So with that being said, there are a lot of variables when it comes to ways, and Colin did mention one. One was time, two is logistics. Financially, it could be very draining, and the third one is your own physical abilities. As someone with family, I didn't want to be too far away from them. I did one at UConn specifically because my mentor, Dr. Mankwa, I wanted a letter from him, and I wanted to work with him so he can write a stronger letter for me, which is what I did. And the next one I did at Mount Sinai, which was a high volume place, and that really crafted me, also drained me a lot. So I didn't think I had bandwidth to do another way. And I was out of time for ERAS. So again, that's the third one that you want to decide whether you want to do it before ERAS or after ERAS.
Totally fair. Corey, did you want to add something?
Yes. And I think I forgot it, but yeah, no, I'm so sorry. Maybe it'll come back to me.
No worries. Yeah, these are all really excellent insights. Um, our second question was, how did you all gauge your fit when you were on your ways? Would anyone like to chime in?
I can start this one. At UConn, I really loved it. Everything about it. So what I was gauging was how do you fit in with the faculty members? Their teaching strategies, their mentoring, the nursing team, how well do you get along with them? You know, are they friendly people overall? How accepting are they of mistakes that you may make in the OR? And another thing that I did was I was also looking at how they were treating their residents, right? And the level of autonomy that was afforded to higher level residents and how much they were doing overall. And other things, again, location is always number one. On Sinai, because I lived in New York City and I live in the Bronx, which is much cheaper, I don't think I can afford living in Manhattan. So I wanted to see if it was feasible just commuting from the Bronx to Manhattan for you know during my residency years, and it really wasn't, honestly. So it really helped me put things into perspective.
Very realistic take. Colin?
Yeah, I would type this in the chat, but I want it on the screen for when people rewatch this. If you apply for away rotations and you get them, that's great. You should always really scour their website to see if they offer scholarships to do away rotations at their institution. I got both scholarships for both of my away rotations and essentially paid no money to do my away rotations based on how much they gave me. And that allowed me to do those away rotations, including all my flights and relocation and Airbnbs, all that stuff. So definitely look out for those. Every institution will have something either from the medical school or on the away rotation like website that they have. Make sure that you apply on the deadlines and follow up and stuff like that, because a lot of times they do have this general like undergraduate medical education fund that if you keep on asking them if they have any leftover money or if they can help you, they will. So definitely look out for those resources.
Wow, that's awesome information to know. And ways can definitely be very expensive. Looks
I
like
think
there's a
one way, sorry, were you about to
go
say
on.
something? I
No.
was going to say one thing for fit. Every place is different. It doesn't mean, and every person is different, so it can be sometimes tough to compare apples to apples. But for me, I think looking at the residents and seeing what their end product is relative. So like, what's the chief resident look like? What do the senior fellows look like? And are they, in a position, and maybe going to places that I want to be once I'm done residency was a relatively objective way for me to get a sense of this would be a good place for me. Um, just because person to person interactions can vary, and it's not necessarily like indicative of what your fit would be there in the long term. But if you see the residents are performing at a level that you'd want to perform at, or doing things that you'd want to do when you're at their level, I think that can help sort of clarify if the rotation is a good fit for you.
Good advice. Nidhi?
I agree with everything that everyone said. And there's a piece of advice that a resident gave me when I was on a sub that I really think resonated with me because at the end of the day, I'm truly just a girl and um, I really read into vibes and kind of just energy, and that's important. And I think that's a big factor. But also remember that in vascular, it's small, and so people come and go very quickly. And there can be a few people that maybe aren't your best friends or the best people you connect with, but ultimately take that with a grain of salt also. Give yourself a little bit more credit and also think about like what product you want to be, like others were saying, in terms of like where do you want to be when you're done, in terms of what job, what career. Because really you could be working with a resident and yeah, you want to be at the greatest place, but I think that type of advice in terms of people and fit is important, and it is a big factor in how I made my rank list. But in a field like vascular, there's often just one or two per year, and so it can feel like a lot, but it can also change very quickly based on the new one or two people that you bring in or the people that come after you. So don't underestimate how easily things can fluctuate in a field like vascular. It's so I guess it's not really a lot of advice except for it's volatile and take everything with a grain of salt because it's just hard to really get a good sense of anything off of one snapshot in time.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And vascular as a field has changed so much in recent years. So I'll skip down to the last question here. How did away rotations impact your application, if at all, whether regards to letters of rec, exposure to different institutions or regions? Any thoughts? Corey, go ahead.
Um, I s- and I'm saying this kind of speaking to those that like don't have home programs or kind of some mentors. I had only one letter of rec before my audition rotations, and so like before my audition, I'm sorry. Can you answer your question again?
Oh, just how away rotations impacted your application,
Oh, yes. Okay.
whatever shape that may
I
be.
will say, yes. My away rotations, all of my letters of rec came from program directors on my away rotations. And oftentimes during interviews, again, no secret, I'm a DO, and that elephant would get brought up. And the conversation of essentially why I was sitting in front of them or in front of the screen was due to my letters of rec from those audition rotations. So I will heavily say that, as an applicant without a lot of who you know in the field, that will hold a lot of weight doing those audition rotations and having program directors that know each other in the very small field talk to the others on your behalf for you speaks volumes. So I feel like wave rotations can be very beneficial to your application in that sense. They can also harm you, but that's a positive.
High risk, high reward. Felix?
Yeah, so it does help a lot. I know programs that would guarantee interviews when you rotate with them, and most likely will accept you. I know some very competitive programs that accepted, I think, two or three of their away rotations, students. So it really plays a big impact on you as well, because again, just like interviews, for away rotations, you're gauging your fit for them as they are for you. And you should never compromise on you gauging your fit for them and put your best foot forward, work hard. I also want to say that even if you don't rotate before ERAS, doing it after ERAS or like, because I did Mount Sinai about a week before ERAS ended, so I didn't even bother to ask for letters. But by the end of my rotation, one of the program head, the PD, APD, said, if you want me to call a program on your behalf, please reach out and I will do that for you. So that tells how much away rotations kind of helps. And so whenever you're on these rotations, just know that it would either make or break you, even for programs that, even if you decide you don't want that program per se.
Colin?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's being said. I would add that I did my Mayo away rotation after ERAS came out, and my co-sub I was Jeremy, who is now my co-intern. So we both were rotating after ERAS, and that didn't really impact the whole process at all. So we get really bogged down in, oh, my third year schedule has to be surgery in the middle so that I'm optimal, and then my fourth year schedule I have to have all my away rotations before ERAS so I get letters, and truly at the end of the day doesn't matter too much. I would also like to add that kind of what Felix was alluding to, that the connections you make just by being at a different institution and interacting with an attending one day where you're in a case that was hard and you're there for 9 hours and it's a mess. And then you kind of debrief about that and they're like, hey, you stayed, you were there. Why don't I, connect you with someone at XYZ? I actually was on a sub-I in family medicine as my last rotation for my home institution. And one of the attendings I was working with had like a friend that worked at Mayo and got me connected with them too, just and anesthesia. So like you make weird connections with people and that just only will help you in the long run. So
Wow, that's fantastic. I'm glad things all worked out. Any final thoughts on Aways?
Not really any additional thoughts, but just be mindful about where you pick them, for all the reasons that we just shared. And like I will say, I think some of your letters of rec, depending on where you do them, kind of open up certain regions. So if that's part of your application in some way, like I did a 2 aways in California, and I do think that sort of like is why I have a lot more interviews on the West Coast, essentially, because those attendings are more familiar with each other, where they train together. So a lot of that just kind of comes into play, and some of that's hard to know going into it, like who trained with who and who talks to who and who's friends with who. I'm sure someday someone will make an extensive network so that we
Right.
can all pre-plan, but it does help. So be mindful as much as you can be. Yeah.
Thanks, Nidhi. And Armin, did you by any chance have anything to add from your perspective? No pressure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's, a little different as an IMG. I did 4 sub-Is, but how I did my first one after I'd done research. So I did a research semester at Mayo. And that was kind of, when I was done with that, I asked Dr. Colvey, who's the program director at Mayo, if I could do a sub-I because they didn't have sub-I applications open for international students. So she helped me with that. And so that's how I, was able to get a sub-I without having VSLO. And then the sub-Is I did at UCLA and Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles was through an exchange program at my medical school. So I did an exchange semester there at UCLA. And then finally, the sub I did at Mount Sinai, that was through Mount Sinai has a separate application open for international students where you can apply. So that's also, an option for international medical students. It is different because, we have to do it before graduating. You have to be a medical student, and most people who apply for vascular surgery are, have graduated from medical school. So it is a bit earlier. I mean, our problem isn't, doing a sub-I too late. It's doing it, sometimes even too early. I did my sub-I 1 year before applying. So yeah, I mean, if anyone wants help with how to find sub-Is at IMG, you can reach out to me. I'd be happy to help with that.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Armin. All right, on to our next slide for the sake of time. So these are some miscellaneous questions. We'll start with research. Number one, what role did research play in your application? And did you take a research year? Why or why not? And Nidhi, as I know you decided to take a research year, would you be willing to start us off?
Yeah. I think my research experiences definitely added to my application. I guess I'll start with kind of tackling the second question and then going back to the first one. But like I said, I discovered sort of vascular middle to late of my third year. And so I really took a research year one to like essentially buy myself more time to be sure that I wanted to do this. And then to also kind of build the network and application that I wanted to have before I applied. I go to school with like no home programs. We don't have any affiliated residency programs in anything. We're fairly new medical school. And so I think for me at that point, having decided that late, it wouldn't have made sense to apply that cycle. And I needed to kind of build that network and connection. I do think you can apply vascular even if you decided late in your third year if you have the right sort of backing behind you. But I just didn't think I had that. So I think those were really big reasons why I took my research year. And then ultimately, I also kind of took it to decide whether I wanted to be at a research institution for residency and whether that was important to me going forward. I didn't know whether academics was something I was really married to or not. And then I think kind of throughout my research year, really figured I really loved it and wanted to do that. And so then that kind of ties into the first question, where it's a pretty big role in my application because that was something I was seeking regardless of where I matched. So even institutions that didn't have required research years, it's something I talked about and asked about in terms of what my opportunities would be, and what I could do to set myself up for success after residency in terms of a future academic career. And I think all of that just helped to add to my application. But I think vascular is special and unique in that, like everyone is saying, like there's such great mentors and people that are really willing to bring folks in. I don't think you have to have this extensive research background to match at a place that you're really happy with. I think really what they care about is to see that you're interested. And I think everyone should have the scientific perspective and be well read and educated and, you know, have those skill sets. But do you have to be like the next surgeon scientist that they're looking for? No. We're not neurosurgery and for good reason. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Right, there's a whole spectrum. Valerie, did you have anything to add by any chance?
Yeah, I totally agree with Needy that like it's important to sort of go in with the like ability to talk about research or talk about like any scientific background that you might have, or at least be open-minded about it when you're interviewing at programs. But vascular is not some other specialties. So some of the advice that I got from a mentor was that something that program directors are looking for is really like, have you done research before? And then that's like a box checked. And then if so, like, was it vascular research? And that's a box checked. And so like you don't necessarily have to have like the most publications, but if you've been able to get involved with vascular, and show that like you are interested in it and you're able to like be involved in a project and be able to talk about that project in an educated way, I think that can be really helpful. But again, also that will vary program to program depending on how heavy an emphasis that they have on research. So if it's like the big name academic institution, they might want to hear a little bit more about research projects that you've done in the past and like where you would want to go with that research in the future.
Totally fair. Other comments?
Yeah, I'd like to give a separate opinion than Val, I suppose. My experience at a couple of programs were that they explicitly in the interview told me my stats of research, specifically how many first author publications I had, how many publications total, which sort of took me by surprise because I had the same impression that like research is always important in any academic field, but not as important as neurosurgery. So that was, take that for what you will. And another thing I would also add is that if you put a research experience on your application, you must know what it is about and what the findings were. I think in almost every single interview I had one 5-minute interview of someone who asked me a question about a specific project, about a specific question that they had about that project. So if you were fifth author and your name was on the paper or the presentation because your friend was doing it, you really have to know what that project is about because someone will ask you about it.
We'll provide a little bit of different input. So I didn't have research. I had a master's degree, I had a thesis that was all fine and dandy, and I didn't touch research after that. I thought I wanted to do emergency medicine until maybe January of third year. And I always prioritized my time off in school when it was like dedicated chunks of research to go travel with my husband because we weren't ever together. So I think, obviously, yes, it harmed me in some ways, but being able to discuss why I didn't have research was important in my interviews instead of just being like, oh, whatever, I just kind of like it was fine. I forgot about it. But just explaining like I wanted to do emergency medicine. It's not a field I need to have research in. I didn't prioritize it. I prioritized my family and spending time with my husband and doing these things that I love. And that was that. And so it's very program dependent. And yes, it will immediately get you to not be even considered at some, but at a lot. If you can talk about it, you have other things in your application, then it's possible.
Oh, big range of experiences. All right. And then we had a few other questions. Any on first, if any of you felt like you had any perceived weaknesses, either perceived by yourself or perceived by others in your application, and how you handled them, if applicable.
I can go with this one, and kind of like give a transition from the research and how it played a role. I think research is very important in vascular surgery and in surgery in general. I My perceived weakness was in research. I did cardiology research undergrad. In med school, I didn't do a lot with regards to research. And that was because my interest shifted from academics to advocacy and leadership. And that's what I did a lot. I here, even before med school, I founded a community organization here in the Bronx. I also founded two clubs, student organizations at Upstate, and I was involved with Medical Society for the State of New York, AMA, which I advocated for minority and underserved patient populations. And I really made sure that that was felt in my applications. And I told them vividly that my interest has shifted from research to advocacy and leadership. However, I'm still curious and very interested in research. Not to say that I did not do research at all. I did, and just like I think was it Needy that or somebody must have said before, is I made sure that box was checked. Did you do research? Yes, I did. Were you able to? Can you interpret data? Yes, I can, because I've done that before, and there were a few research in vascular surgery as well as book chapter that I wrote with Dr. Rowe. So that was my weakness, and that was how I felt like I was able to kind of mitigate that weakness.
Thank you, Felix.
Yeah, to add to that idea, I guess if you have a lot of great things going on in your application, it doesn't really mean much unless you have like a full narrative and understanding of what you're bringing to the table. So, if things are sort of take the time to look at your application and understand what your strengths are and your weaknesses again. But I think sometimes people might underrate trying to understand their strengths as well. Because ultimately, I think when admissions committees and attendings are evaluating your application, they're trying to picture you as part of their team and what you're bringing to the table. At maybe a 7-year research intensive academic program, they might want a researcher, but in other more clinically sort of focused places, that might not be what they're looking for. So if you have an idea of what you're bringing to the table and you can communicate that effectively, I think you can sort of mitigate some of your weaknesses and also sort of bring out your strengths a little better during the interview process.
A great perspective. Did anything else surprise you all about the application process? Any unanticipated challenges? If not, I think we'll move on to our next section for the sake of time. Okay. And I'll hand it off to Zach.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to start with Felix for this session. Oh, sorry about that. We're going to do the DO applicants first. So as for the first question for the DO applicants, we'd like to start with Corey. And we were just wondering, did you take the USMLE STEP exams in addition to taking the COMLEX exams?
Yeah, I took both times.
Do you
Hmm
feel like that was a necessity for you as a DO?
Absolutely. I didn't know. I mean, sure, I thought I wanted to do emergency medicine, but I knew, plans change. I didn't want to limit myself and be constricted to this box because you'd be naive to unfortunately think that there is still not a longstanding bias from a DO applicant and an MD applicant, though it is less, it is still there. So I never wanted to give any residency program director a reason to not see me as an equal applicant to an MD counterpart and to not take me seriously. And so I just made sure that I, progressed to medical school with the forethought of never giving anybody a reason to not, think that I deserve to be there or have the skills to be there or whatever it might be. So Comlex and USMLE was definitely one of those things because it's an easy cop out if I didn't take it. For a program to say, I'm not considering her. She didn't take it. I cannot compare her to her MD applicants.
Absolutely, it makes a lot of sense. Do you feel like since the medical school preclinical period and potentially post-clinical period has become pass-fail, that this has either changed the opinions of program directors or programs on whether or not you should take step one and how this has changed things?
So my school is actually letter grade. I'm not pass fail. However, even if, step one is pass fail and level one is pass fail, it was still one of those things of like I just needed to have it on there. So it's another tick checked box, whatever it was. And I knew honestly having my school be letter grade, regardless of being top of the class, regardless of what my GPA was, you know, it was never going to hold equal weight in some program directors' eyes as a pass fail MD applicant.
Thank you very much. Was there any way in which you proactively dealt with the potential bias that you were expecting either on the interview trail or as part of the application process? And if so, do you have any advice for some of the DO students who might be facing said bias during their own application processes?
Yes. And that is to just prove them wrong. That is largely why I did an exhausting amount of audition rotations. I bled my bank account dry. I bled my gas tank dry, like physical body gas tank dry, because you just have to show them that it does not matter, that the med student that they're in there that is getting mistaken for residents, a resident left and right is a DO applicant once they finally put my name to an application. You just have to prove them wrong, show up, put in the work, a lot of work. And once you're in front of somebody and it removes this label and the last two letters behind your name and you just you just prove them wrong and do audition rotations. I mean, I'm sorry, it is an unfortunate route that we have to go down, and I know a lot of people maybe didn't even do AIs. But it is if you want something bad enough, like there are ways to do it, and that is one of them.
Thank you so much, Corey. Is there any other piece of advice that you might have for the DO applicants or anything else you'd like to share about your individual experience coming from a DO program?
The other is kind of know your worth. Um, whether it's ever doubt coming from a program director or other students or even your own school, like know your worth and that like when you show up and you're answering these 10 questions left and right correct and you are getting asked to come back to help for procedures because there's not enough residents to cover it, like you did that. And the two letters behind your name do not matter. And so just remember that.
Thank you so much for your time and for all of your advice. Next, we'd like to move on to Armin as the IMG applicant on our panel. Before we go into some of the questions that we have here, I would just like to know, Armin, if you have any specific advice for any of the IMG applicants attending the panel tonight, or in addition, if you'd like to share anything specific about your experience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think a lot of things we've discussed today are things that are very similar for both US, like MD and DOs and IMGs. I think if you just do that as an IMG, you have good chances. I have a lot of friends that are IMGs and matched into vascular surgery this year, three from Mayo who are research fellows. And then, yeah, so I think it's very possible. Um, and well, the question, I talked a little bit about the clinical experiences, Zach, but I think, as I said, I think a good way to get into it is like having mentors, similar to everyone else. You need mentors in vascular surgery, preferably like in the US, that have other contacts. And my way into that was through research. I did research, here at Mayo, and they really helped me, get other sub-Is and throughout the application period. Uh, and so I think it's very similar to what MDs and DOs in the US have to do.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Were there any specific programs that you used or any other specific ways that you found and secured your clinical experiences, like here in the US? I know you talked about your clinical experiences at Mayo. So if you could provide some maybe additional insight onto how you secured that experience, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, when I did research here, I asked the program director if I could come back for a sub-I, and they were very supportive with that. And then how I decided to, where I should do my other sub-Is was kind of I tried looking to see where I could do it because a lot of places don't allow IM or medical students from that are not from the US to do sub-Is. I know that some places it's still possible, like if you're like in the American University of Beirut, and you have access to the VSLO or VLSO. I don't know what the name of that portal is. But if you don't have access to it, usually it's you have to go with applying straight through the program director. I talked with Dr. Hahn, who was at Mount Sinai when I was at MAM, and he said, well, you can apply for one at Mount Sinai. So he was very supportive with that. And I wanted to do sub-Is in kind of the major cities in the US. So that's, New York and Los Angeles. So that's kind of why I decided to do the ones at Mount Sinai and UCLA. Well, I see Needy asked a question here how I went about finding my research was in Mayo, and that was so I sent 900 emails to all the major institutions in the United States, and and I got a couple of replies. Uh, and I had some interviews, and that was as a medical student because I needed to do my degree project, which is basically a research semester. um, and and Mayo and my medical school has a research collaboration. So Dr. DiMartino, who's a chair at Mayo, responded, and he was very supportive and has been a mentor ever since.
Sounds like an incredible opportunity. And 900 is definitely no small number. So congratulations on your part and putting all that together and making it work.
Thank you, Zach.
Do you have any other thoughts on observership or shadowing experiences if you did any of those, or did you look for any more formal electives outside of the sub-Is that you did at your rotation institutions?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can do a sub-I, if you can do it, it's of course preferred. But I think if you graduated, it's sometimes not possible to come as a well, you have to be a medical student to do a sub-I at most places. So then you could do it. You could do an observership. I know, I've had here in Mayo, we've had a couple people come as doctors coming in to do an observership, and you can show that you're still a good applicant by being there and answering questions that the attendings have. But coming as a doing a sub-I is of course preferred. But when it's not possible, I think the other options are good as well.
Thank you so much, Armin and Corey, both for your experiences and coming from such a unique pathway into successfully mastering vascular surgery. And obviously, congratulations on your matches as well. All right. Next slide, please. Sorry, I accidentally muted myself. We have a question.
Thank you so much. And also thank you to all the panelists that are here. This is super helpful. I'm a first year medical student and I'm a DO. I'm also an international student. So a very lots of barriers to me getting the experiences that I need. So I'm just wondering, this is a question I think that maybe Corey and Armin would be able to give me some insight. How do you overcome not have maybe finding more mentorship, especially if your particular program, especially a lot of DO schools don't have home program that are surgical. How do you try to overcome that, find experts in the field who can guide your experience? And do you have any other tips other than cold email? I know that's a very impressive number of emails to send that might have been helpful for you. Thank you.
Yeah, I obviously no home program or no any programs. It it was just putting yourself out there. You have to be vulnerable and you have to shoot your shot. You miss 100 of them that you don't take. You have to just say, "Hey, I'm interested in this. Essentially, what can you do for me? How can you help me?" And people are going to see a passionate, hardworking, eager individual and want to help you. I got so very fortunate that those that I met along my path saw that and opened up doors for me. But, there's no shame. And if you're on a different rotation, go and introduce yourself to the general surgery PD. Go and introduce yourself to the vascular surgeons. I was on a lot of different rotations where I would sneak away and go and introduce myself to all the vascular surgeons there because you don't know who they know. Um, and you will find people on your path that you just click with, and you have to hold them near and dear to your heart. I mean, my very first rotation at SLU, their fellow, she was a DO. She was when she applied, she had to forego the DO match and just apply for the MD match. That's when she did it. And, you know, she gave me great advice. And everywhere you're at, you'll meet those people and just hold on to them. And they will tell you the same thing. They will say, please reach out. So you just gotta reach out to them. You just have to put yourself out there. Just like 900 emails.
I will add to that. I really think Corey's right, and I think that I think if you put yourself out there, you'll get your shot. And I think once you have that shot, I think that's when you really need to, show that. I mean, you mean serious business, So I think when you have the opportunity, you really have to work really hard, and I think they see that and they appreciate that, and people, appreciate people who work hard and are willing to help them achieve their goals, and that's kind of what mentors are for. So I think that's kind of what my advice would be.
Also, reach out and try and go to like national vascular meetings if you can. And that's another great way to meet people. Reach out to their residents. Reach out, social media goes so far nowadays. As lame as that sounds, I'm so sorry. It just kind of is what it is. You try that route, you just got to get creative.
All right. Thank you both so much. And Colin, please, if you'd like to say something.
Yeah, and not related to this question, but we're having a discussion in the chat about more about the research piece, specifically listing publications, presentations, all that jazz. I want to sort of address to the group because it's a lot to type. But I would say the question was, how many presentations, publications can you put to look competitive, etc. And the advice I got and that I wholeheartedly believe is that you really shouldn't be duplicating experiences on your application that much. Take, for example, I have a project and I can squeeze a poster, an oral presentation, and a published abstract in a paper out of. Those are 4 experiences that you can technically list all on AAMC on the ERAS application, but they're not actually different research experiences. So in my opinion, you should only list one presentation and the final publication. So if I got an oral presentation, I would list that over the poster. And then if I got a publication, I would list that over the published abstract. And so that's kind of it for that experience. Even if you used it for different other meetings, I believe that that's more sensible and people won't really look through that. If you continue to have, let's say, 3 publications, but out of that you get 12 experiences, that does kind of look a little fishy to some people that you have so many numbers, but your CV only lists 3 publications. So I'm sure some people have other opinions on that. And like we're talking in the chat, the AAMC numbers of the research experiences sometimes is overinflated based off people listing literally everything. So take all of that with a grain of salt. People really do, if you have a PMID of a published abstract or a presentation or a publication, that goes a heck of a lot longer than some of the other stuff.
Thanks so much for clearing that up, Colin, as well. I know it's an extremely common question that we get as medical students and have tried to figure out for years.
Yeah, it's
All
just
right.
very hard because ERAS, I think, lets you list things multiple times. And so some of those AAMC data tables are a little bit suspicious. So just read those all with a grain of salt.
I would also say some people are more sticklers than other, but if you look at the fine print of some of the regional and national meetings, if you have a poster presentation of a project at one meeting, you can't actually submit that same project to another meeting. And so if some people see that, they don't like it. So I would really make sure that I always tried to do one thing at a meeting and then write the paper up and submit it someplace. And that was kind of it for that project, but take it as you will.
Yeah, I will say I asked a couple different people about how to approach it, and they all said different things. So just go with your gut feeling. I suspect some attendings don't look at each of your entries and just look at the giant block of text. So, I don't know.
Yeah,
Do what you think is the best.
absolutely. They got a lot to go through. Sometimes just seeing the block, you're like, yeah, good enough. All right. So thank you, everybody, for those additional pieces of advice. Really appreciate it. To move on to and talk about our last subject for tonight, we'll be talking about navigating interviews. Um, and for as far as the interview portion of this goes, we'd like to start with Valerie, some of the questions here. And so to start with, how did you prepare for some of the interviews? Getting through the sub-Is can be scary, but this is the part where you really need to shine through here. So what were some of the things that you did?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the big things to remember is that your preparation might change throughout the interview season. But I think what I did, especially sort of at the beginning of interview season, is there's a couple of questions that you're probably going to get over and over again. And you might not feel super comfortable with your answers in earlier interviews, but by the later interviews, it'll feel like a little bit rehearsed. So I would just go for your earlier interviews, sort of prepare answers to standard questions like, tell me about yourself, why vascular. Another one that I got a lot was like, tell me about like a challenge that you've had or a challenge that you've seen clinically or that you predict that you'll have in residency or with vascular down the line. Um, and just sort of have an idea of what your answers to those questions might be. And then obviously I would do a little bit of research on the program itself and really have things to ask for each interview to those people who are interviewing you, because a lot of the interviews are sort of conversational, and maybe the first 5 minutes of your interview are questions about you, but then the next 5 to 10 are you asking them questions. So I would definitely go in like showing that you have done your research and you know the program that you're interviewing with, and like having questions prepared for the interviewers.
Great. That's awesome. Anybody else have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I would say that my first couple, I said this before when we were just chatting, but my first couple interviews, I was like, oh, I have to know all of the faculty. I have to make sure I know all the publications the last 5 years that they've done. That stopped very quickly. I basically, after my second one, just kind of showed up and was like, I'm here. You know my application. I know my application. Let's just talk. And I felt like that was actually more valuable than being prepared, because if you could have like just a general conversation with someone about why they love vascular, just like your hobbies, that for me went a lot like farther than talking about some of your research experiences or some experience you had on your application. So I think that over preparing probably isn't the best thing.
Yeah, just being able to have a conversation like a human being is like actually a huge part of it.
Felix, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was gonna say that again, just to kind of resonate what everyone has said so far. Starting out, there was this biginterview.com resource. I think Upstate provided it to us for free. It's the basic version, there's more advanced versions. The reason why I like that resource is there are like specialty specific um columns that you can go to, and they have questions that pertain to a specific specialty. And it was good in a way that you can record yourself and then play it back to yourself and see how you are responding to these questions. They also give you some pointers on like, and then give you like examples. You watch some videos of how other people answer those questions, and gestures and other things, facial expressions and what they mean. Especially for the virtual side of the interviews. But again, I only rehearsed those for my first two interviews, and then I realized that most interviews were super conversational, and they really wanted to know who you are as a person. So just put that in mind. It's nice to kind of rehearse your answers and keep everything under 2 minutes, I'd say. But as you go along, it's okay to kind of modify what you've done. And just like Colin said, I also researched almost every attendant to see. I didn't really care much about. I kind of looked at their research, but if I saw something interesting, I asked about. But mostly, I cared about where they went to school, if they've been at the institution for a very long time. What do they think? What changes have they seen? If they just came there. what made them move to that institution and all that sorts of questions were some of the questions that I came up with. And oh, by the way, you should probably spend more time generating questions for them than answering questions to them.
And Corey, please.
So I will also back this by yes, not rehearsing, not sounding robotic. I mean, I was blasting Pitbull in my bathroom before my interviews, but if there are things in your application that make you unique and you want to talk about them, what you can do is figure out creative ways to always kind of tie it back into the conversation. Like, take this general topic that you have and mind map out 10 different talking points that can lead and bring you back into this one point that you really want to kind of share again with them. The other thing was, okay, maybe not researching every single attending, but I definitely, for interviews that I very much cared about, checked to see if they had research with my letters of recs. Knowing that my letters of recs were really large in the vascular field, I wanted to see if the person I was going to talk to knew them. And if they did, if they had worked on something with them. And if they did, what was that? So I don't get caught off guard. And it is a talking point because sometimes maybe I don't even know who your letter of rec is. And then you can be like, oh yeah, I was with your bud. Would be the other way to kind of prepare but not prepare because it is conversational and time again, so many attendings were like, everybody's here. All of your guys' applications are great. What we're interviewing you for is to see if you're going to fit with us. And you do that through conversation.
Thank you, Corey. And Colin.
Yeah, I just had one more quick thing to add, which is strong mentorship throughout the end of third year and into fourth year is really key. At least it was for me. I frequently was texted by one or two of my closest mentors saying, hey, the PD from X just texted me about you. Sounds like your interview's coming up. They had this to say, just mention that, like say hi or something. And that like went so much farther, just having that connection with that someone saying, yes, they are interested in you. Make sure you talk about this, this, or this. Was like awesome to have. So if you don't have those connections, we kind of talked about this before, but go to your regional meetings. Walk up to faculty that you notice their names on their badges, and you're like, oh, I've seen that name from papers I've read before. Or your national meetings, you can go through the mentorship programs and just start talking to these people because you never know who your biggest confidant will be in fourth year.
Back here, please.
I think at some point you start to figure out what they're gonna the type of questions that come up, and then you can start coming up with sort of three or four case studies, I guess, from your clinical experiences or your research experience that like can apply to a dozen different questions, and that kind of makes the interviews get easier as you go along. I think one of the underrated things for me was uh, prioritizing my clinical experiences in third and fourth year because that gave me experiences that I could draw on when they asked me questions about patient experiences, conflict, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and I think some of those times where, I spent a few extra hours in the operating room or shadowed or, you know, just spent more time in the clinical setting, gave me some experiences that I could talk to that were impactful. So I think sometimes you can get caught up in the meta game of like research and publications, etc. But your clinical experiences are equally important to showing that like you have deeply engaged with patients and you're a serious doctor or plan on being a serious doctor.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody else who spoke on that topic. There's really some excellent insight as far as the interview process. Given that we're getting close to the end of our scheduled time period, I would like to ask the third question on the page here, just about how we gauged fit at the program when you were on your interviews, because I know plenty of people were interested in not only how you as an applicant do well in the interviews, but how you're supposed to sort of interview the program back. And so if anybody has some insight they'd like to share on that, we'd love to hear it.
I can take this one. I think when you go to interview, I think interviewing the program especially starts from the pre-interview social. I anticipate majority of interviews this year, coming year, I mean, is going to be in person because even on some of the virtual interviews and the second looks that I did, for those ones they asked which one was better, and most applicants did hint that in persons were better. So again, during those times, you're gonna kind of like usually during the pre-social, pre-interview social, especially for the in-person ones, you have the attendants start off, probably hang out with you guys for maybe an hour, and then they'll leave, and that's the most casual setting you'll probably find them. By the way, you're still interviewing, so you should be in character. There's going to be drinks, there's going to be food. Please be in character. You're acting for that night and the day after. So just like try to get the vibe and see how, they kind of get along with everyone. And for me, most importantly, like when we're sitting around the table or going around, how are the residents kind of relating with each other? Or is it like a broski vibes or just like super formal vibes versus where they kind of like telling jokes among themselves, were they telling jokes among each other, or like with attendance, were they saying some funny things that attendance said in it, or those were some of the things that I'm like, oh, I love these guys, right? Versus, I don't know if I think I'll be stressed. I mean, that at least that's what I did on interview day. You can tell they will show interest. I feel like they kind of show interest in you as an applicant, and some in programs will be very nonchalant about you and your experiences and everything. And honestly, I wouldn't personally go to a program that are nonchalant about all 4 years of my hard work. Um, I would rather prioritize those who kind of like were excited about to see me and about my experiences.
Great. Thank you very much, Felix. And Colin, if you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm talking a lot, so please silence me if I'm being annoying. But I would say that I was like extremely type A about this whole process and made like a matrix of like 40 fields for each program I interview at and like specific criteria for them all. And that was extremely helpful, I would say. I don't regret doing it at all. A lot of it I could find from the website, and some of it I did have to like probe during the interview. But when I looked back at every program, I could very quickly, within 2 to 3 minutes, remind myself of that program from what I wrote down day of. And it was really helpful for ranking. I also had like this highly weighted column of vibes. That was what it was called. And that was the one that I weighted the most on my decisions. And so just putting down a blurb of how you felt about that interview was really helpful for me. And there was actually some that I wouldn't have expected to rank as high. And because of that, I ranked them much higher than I expected. The other thing I wanted to mention that I was talking in the chat is how much money you should budget for all of this stuff. I went to about like 11 or 12 interviews in person, and I like budgeted the heck out of my way and of doing that, and including all of the fees of applying for everything, I was just a little over 4 grand. So there's like a way to do it on like the cheap end, but I definitely heard some people spending over 10K on their interviews. So it's a lot of money. And I'm sure that at least at my school, the financial aid departments like know this, and you can take out more loans based on your required amount for in-person interviews, which is helpful.
Excellent. I will hopefully be spending under $10,000 when I go for interviews, but we'll see. Corey, please, if you'd like to add to that.
Well, I would like to add to the original question of kind of like how did you gauge the vibe check? Did they pass the beer test? I don't, you can watch residents. I mentioned the kind of the photos. If it is a virtual one, like do they put up photos of the residents? What are they doing? Do they look happy or really sad? Do they have photos of the residents and the attendings together doing things outside? But if you are fortunate enough to be in person, like watching the attendings interactions with the residents, um, it says a lot. Whatever you flavor you want, you'll be able to see that. Um, and then how do the residents interact with the staff, with the hospital, with everybody on your tour? Are they very pleasant? Are they nice? Are people saying hi to them? Are they interacting with the other specialties? Like those are things that matter to me. And again, it's not everybody's flavor, but like you will be able to pick up on those things just from average interaction of somebody bringing in your lunchtime food for the interview and are all the residents getting up and going to help out this one single individual carrying all of this food kind of thing? And you'll pick up on those things definitely.
Great. Thank you, Corey. Nidhi, I know you had your hand up previously. I know you took it down. If you don't have anything to add, that's fine. I'm happy to have Felix talk as well, but I wanted to give you the opportunity as well.
No, I'll let Felix go, then I'll add very at the
All right.
end. I don't have much new to say.
Thank you very
I
much.
was I was just gonna reiterate what Corey said and kind of add on to it is that during interviews, these programs are gonna be on their best behaviors. So even for programs that you see them as super malignant on Reddit and on the Excel sheet, will be the most like interesting like you won't even sniff out anything. So you have to heighten your senses for any least. Like if you see the least thing that makes you question them, it's probably big. Okay. So pay attention to those little, gimmicks that you might see on your video.
The other thing I just wanted to add, in addition to what everything has already been said, but it's just know yourself. I think it's really easy to like talk to friends and be influenced and think like, oh, this is a great program. And honestly, all of the programs are great for one reason or another. And it's really just about figuring out what's important to you. And I think like my rank list probably looked very different from everyone else's here, or their rank list looked very different from mine for whatever reason, because we have different priorities, and that's totally fine. And we're all going to be great, I think, surgeons. And so it's really about figuring out what are your priorities, and they don't have to be the same as someone else's. And so kind of stay true to yourself, figure out what matters to you. And those priorities can change over your interview season, of course, but having a sense of how you felt that aligned with you at each program was really helpful. And I think ultimately at the end, I like ranked my programs based on complete vibes without like thinking about anything. And then I did the kind of Excel sheet based on the notes I had taken and kind of weighted things a couple different ways. And it actually turned out that the top seven ended up being the same as my vibes list for both weighting, like the way I had weighted it both ways. So I felt really good about that. And so I think just really being in tune with that and what's important to you will help you kind of make those decisions.
Okay, one last thing I forgot to add. So sorry. It'll be super quick. The other thing is don't be afraid to ask your fellow applicants that are also there at an appropriate time. Hey, where'd you do your rotations? What did you think about it? What did you think about this other interview? And you know what? Take it with a grain of salt. But I I did that and it was very helpful because it was like some people have been inside the hospital that I'm interviewing and I don't know. I thought, it looked good on paper, but they give very specific examples. And I know some people might not give individuals the benefit of the doubt and think that maybe they're giving you falsified information, but it really is. The more you ask, kind of the more you know, and you can't be afraid to just ask.
The other very quick thing I'll say, going back to Felix's comment, is there is certain ways that people respond to your questions that makes you sort of heighten your sense. At least for me, there are some questions that were answered very politically or with a certain terminology that like rubbed me the wrong way, specifically about culture or about how hours are treated for the residents, stuff like that. So just always be listening to when leadership really answers your questions about things that are important to you.
Thanks to each of you for all those individual pieces of insight. Really grateful to hear your perspectives. If nobody has anything else to add, then I'd like to hand things over to Judy to finish us off here.
All right. Well, that concludes our prepared questions for this evening. Thank you all so much to our outstanding panelists for taking your time out of this evening to share your advice and very hard-earned wisdom with us. We are just over time, but can maybe make time for 1 to 2 final questions from the crowd, if that's okay. If anyone has a lingering question, please use the raise hand function or feel free to enter it into the chat and then we'll wrap up.
I guess I'll ask another question. Um, I know we talked a little bit about research, but outside of that, what do you think were other factors that really made you stand out? And how were you able to find out if that particular program was a good fit for you, given your background, if they could support you to become a competent surgeon?
I guess I can sort of speak to that. And I don't think this was necessarily intentional that I was trying to beef up my CV or purposely make myself stand out, but I got a lot of questions on my advocacy work and my policy work, and so that's something that I spent a lot of my time in med school doing. And so I think that was it was fun to just kind of bring something else that's important to me in my career sort of into the conversation. So I'm not saying like that's some formula you should follow, but really just figure out what you like and what you're passionate about and find like ways to bring that up in your interview or bring it back to that like Corey was saying earlier. I think it's really about why you and how you bring it back to that in some way or another when they're asking you questions. And even if you get like a challenging question during an interview or something, I think you can always find a way to recenter it on what makes you you and why they should have you.
Yeah, and I know I'm not maybe speaking to everybody, but I was a college athlete and then I raced post collegiately as well. And like that was my uniqueness about me. And, you know, a lot of these applications are going to just start to look very similar to the program director. So if you have something that makes you special and unique, be proud of it and talk about it, and it makes you stand out. You know, with advocacy work, whatever, even if it's not med school related, but you have a passion that you have been passionate about for a long time in your life, talk about it. Talk about how you've developed and grown and how it's helped you grow. And that makes you special and unique and stand out in a way versus trying to play it safe with these safe answers of, the politically correct kind of answers. And it's like you can't be afraid to just fully be yourself and like be super proud of that and confident in what you're saying.
Just want to briefly touch on it. I know we're over time, but yeah, just like everyone said, I remember University of Rochester when I went in there and we started talking with the division chair. He talked about the fact that they have a lot of satellite locations, and they realized that I did a micro-credential program at my home institution about rural and underserved service tract, and that was like improving accessibility for patients with limited access to hospitals. And he asked, what would I do about they having all these satellite locations and catchment area that some of their patients have difficulty coming in, and I shared some interest in that. And the next question he asked is, what do you want to be, right? And I was like, well, I want to be an academic surgeon. I was like, is that it? Don't you want to be a program director? Don't you want to be division chief? Don't you want to be the next chair of SVC? Like, stuff like that. Again, talking about your interest is one. Another thing is looking at programs that are kind of interested in investing in you and helping you develop professionally is another thing that for me stood out to me. And if there's any advice I'll give anyone, since we're on the final thought slide, is always look for programs that are willing to invest in you. I went for interviews and there were programs that I was like, oh, I'm interested in PE, and I realized you don't do a lot of PE. And they were like, well, if you want to do PE, IR does PE, and we can craft like an elective for you so you can get your hands on that. And those were programs that I was like, oh, if you're willing to go the extra mile to invest in my professional development and my training, then I love you. So kind of pay attention to those things as well.
Great. I think we're getting close to the conclusion. Thank you to everyone so much again. This has truly been such an informative panel, and we really could not thank you more for your time this evening. And thank you also to our lovely audience for staying on this long. We hope you also learned a thing or two tonight.
Thanks everybody for your time. We really appreciate it.